Hey guys, well then today I'm going to introduce the object layer. An object layer is a way to specify an entity as opposed to a tile. An object layer stores a global ID, an X and a Y, height and width, and so on. In Phaser we can take those values and use a function called createFromObjects. CreateFromObjects will take our values specified in our JSON or CSV file. What we want to do is store that data in an array and then place our player to that position. First, let's look at the parameters that createFromObjects requires. It requires a name of our object layer that is stored in the map file. It also requires a thing called GID. GID stands for Global ID, which is essentially the ID of your object. A map can have several tile sets, so the tiles used on a map are referenced using the global IDs. Our next parameter is the key. This will be the sprite that our object will display. We could pass in an ID of an image and it will display that image as the object. The next 6 parameters are all optional. There's the frame, where if you have a spreadsheet you can choose which frame suits best. The next one is a boolean value, which will decide the default exist state of the object. If this is set to false, then the object will not exist until we'll tell it to. Then there is autocall. Sprites that are autocalled are called from the camera if it's out of its range. After that there is a group parameter, which will store the objects to a group. We will use this to store spawn positions. Then the last 2 parameters that we won't use are the custom class parameter, which will override the phaser.sprite class as your own. However, your class must extend phaser.sprite and have the same constructor parameters. The last parameter is a boolean named adjustY. By default, tiled uses a bottom left coordinate system, whereas phaser uses a top left coordinate system, so the objects might seem too low down. This parameter moves them up by their height. Alright, now let's jump into the code. So first of all, you want to go into tiled and create a new object layer. Next, I have added a sprite to the tile set called spawn. This will indicate the spawn position of our map. Next, you want to head over to the insert tile button and then place your spawn block anywhere on the map. You can adjust the position of the spawn block by using the select objects tool. Now we need to export our tile map, so first of all we go to file and then press export as, and then you want to save the tile map as a JSON extension. The reason we are using JSON is because JSON is more organized when coming to object layer and it will be easier, whereas CSV just dumps every piece of data into one big block of numbers. Alright, so let's get started with the code. So first of all you want to go into your preload class and change the CSV extension to a JSON. The next parameter is going to be the data. This is an optional JSON data object, so if it's given then the path is ignored and this JSON object will be used for map data instead. So we're just going to set that to null as we want the path to be used. Next we're going to need the format of the map, which is going to be a JSON format. So we can say phaser.tilemap .tiled underscore JSON. So now it knows what format it is, and that will be a lot easier. So next we can actually go into our level 1 class and let's get started with changing some things up, as the JSON format actually requires some things other than CSV. So first of all we can get rid of these two parameters, the width and the height of each tile, because it already knows that from JSON from the JSON file, so we don't need to state that again. So now we need to change the add tile set image. We actually want to also add the tile set ID that is set in the JSON file. Actually, I will show the JSON file later on this video. So this is just going to access the ID that was given in the JSON file. So next we need to change this from map.createLayer. We're actually going to need a string in here, which is we're just going to say tile layer because that is the one that is said in the JSON file. Next, we can actually get started with our createFromObjects function. So we can say okay, map.createFromObject, and ID of the object layer is object layer. I'll set that to 1. Next, we're actually going to need our GID. So we can actually go into our JSON file and we can see here, okay, name object layer 1, and here are the objects properties list, and here we can see our GID. So we can just copy that and plop it in there. Next we're going to need our sprite ID. We're actually going to have no sprite that is going to be displaying our spawn block, so we're just going to make that empty as if it was invisible. Next we need our frame. We're going to set that to 0 as there is no animation. The next parameter is going to be our exists boolean. We're going to set that to true as we want it to exist as the game loads. Next is going to be our article. We're going to set that to false as we don't want the objects to get destroyed when it is out of camera. Next we want to store this data into a group, and we're going to say we're going to call it respawn. So now let's state respawn. We're going to say var respawn. I'm going to set respawn to a group, so we can say game.add.group. Next we need to create our spawn function, so we can go all the way down to where we have stated our functions and just create a new function and call it spawn, and say function, and don't forget the comma. And now we need to check how many respawn objects there are. So we're going to say, okay, so for every respawn object, so for respawn.forEach, so for each respawn we want to run a function, and the parameters of this function is just going to be our spawn point. This is going to get each individual. This spawn point represents one respawn or one spawn point. So this spawn point has an x, a y, a height, and width. So we can access those values using spawn point dot. Don't forget the last parameter is going to be this. And in here we can say player.reset, and we can say spawn point dot x and spawn point dot y. So that's all. Now we can actually go into our create function and call the spawn. Well, you have set our player. We can say in here, okay, spawn. We're going to run this when the game loads, and just for testing we'll just set the player position to 0. So now if we jump into the game and press play, we can see our player gets spawned onto the position that we have put our spawn block in. And that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching and goodbye.